Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for this year's Water Docs at School Action Projects program.
You're going to be undertaking an amazing journey and you're going to be creating a lot of positive changes within your community. So your goal will not only be to create and implement an action project that will protect water within your own community, but also to film the process as well.
Today's session is going to be about how to engage in an action project, and we're going to be sharing some tips and tricks on how you can do so.
So I'd like to introduce who we have here today. So you have myself, my name is Joanne, or you can call me Jo. I'm a project coordinator at LSF. We also have Maham, who is going to be coordinating all of the technical aspects of today's session. And we also have Bob, who is our partner from Ecologos, who is also the main contact for if your teachers have any questions about any program logistics. So before we start filming, we want to think about what kind of action projects you might want to undertake this year. So some of you may have already have some ideas, some of you may not. But today we're going to be showing you how you can effectively implement a successful project and become responsible citizens. So what we'll do is we'll show you some quick and easy tips and tricks and some cool ways on how to get started and some help that you can turn to make sure that your project is as successful as it can be. This is just a copy of the rubric that we judge based on best projects. So that's on page 23. So I won't read through each and every point today, but you can look into that in more detail. But what we'll be doing is we'll be going through some tips that we have so that you can tick off every point in the rubric, but also maximize the amounts of points you can get for the rubric when you're being judged as well. So this is the action project guide that was sent to your teacher. So there's several worksheets for you to complete that you can download and print. The guide was created to help you get equipped with the necessary skills and understanding to engage in a project that will help address a local water-related issue. So after you have an idea of what you want to do within your community, you can start the filming process. So we are going to be updating the guide just a little bit with a little bit more information. So we'll send you an updated version early next week as well. So we're going to be starting off with talking about what is an action project. So you might be aware of what this is. If you're not, that's totally okay. The way that we define an action project is that it is a project that is led by youth. So youth like you around your age that's working together to take on action to create a more sustainable community and making a positive change, whether it's big or small. So an action project is not only youth-led, but it engages you as youth throughout the entire process, from deciding what topic you want to focus on, to identifying the action that you want to undertake, to actually doing the project, and also reflecting about how the project went and what could you do to make it better next time. An action project helps give you a greater understanding of the environmental, social, and economic and cultural issues that affect your own community and help you take action on something that is really important to you and something that you care about. An action project also helps you gain knowledge, skills, and practices and as you design and implement the project. So some of the things that you might develop as you undertake an action project through the program is you might develop some skills on how to test for water quality. You might learn some skills about how to plan your project. You might learn some skills about budgeting. So if you ask for funding, how can I utilize this money that we got effectively? What materials do we need to buy? You might learn some skills about marketing, so how to use social media, how to connect to your newspaper, communication, sending emails and dealing with people that aren't just your age, people who are teachers, people who work in the city, people who are working professionals. You're going to learn a lot of leadership skills and you're going to learn of collaboration skills because this sort of project requires a lot of teamwork from each and every one of you. Lastly, an action project connects you to a lot of community partners that can help you solve local issues as well. So the first step we're going to be talking about is choosing an issue. So here you're going to be talking about finding out what bugs you, what you wish was different, and what could be done better. So before we start a project, we have to identify what kind of local water-related issue bothers us, our school, and our community. So this is something that we look at when we're judging for the best project, is that not only is it youth-led, but the youth identify the issue. So it's not something that your teacher identifies, it's something that you think is important. within your community. And it's something that we look at in terms of what you design in terms of the project, how you do the research, how you implement the project, and how you communicate the project to the rest of your community. So there's a worksheet section on page 3 that you can work on. But one thing that we ask you to think about is to think about an issue that you think is important and something that you think needs to be addressed as soon as possible in either your home, your school, or your community. Some examples that we've seen in the past that other students have talked about is looking at road salt, looking at storm drain pollution, looking at how invasive species affect your local watershed, waterways, looking at plastic water bottles, looking at thermal pollution, water conservation. Those are just some examples, but you can definitely come up with something that is creative, something that is unique that we haven't seen before. So one thing that we look at when we're picking an issue and also ranking in our rubric when we're judging is that you need to define a project goal that addresses something that is local. So we received a question where someone was asking, do you have to look at the entire watershed or can you focus on one waterway? So that really just depends on what you think is possible and what you are interested in. So we're very open to that. So just think about what you want to research the most and think about what troubles you the most. So this is a little strategy that we think would be really good for you to utilize. So let's say, for example, you have 30 people come up with an idea that is all important. We want to pinpoint it down to one. Right? So this activity is called the value line activity. So it's actually a good strategy that you can use to pinpoint one issue and to see where your entire group lies on an issue. So for example, you'll see on the diagram, we have 3 points. We have don't care, neutral, and really care. So the way that this works is, let's say you have your class of 30, you're gonna be in your room. You wanna start in the middle of the room. So you're gonna start in a line in the middle of the room. So that's your neutral position. So what we're going to do is have someone read out some topics. So let's say you pick out 3 topics that show up a lot in what you guys decide. So let's say the first one you want to talk about is plastic water bottles. So maybe plastic water bottles in their local creek is something that is important to you. So you're going to read that out loud. And then what you're going to do is, if that issue is important for you personally, then you're going to take one step forward. So if you take one step forward, that means you really care about that issue and that you think it's something that you want to focus on now. If it's not important to you, then you can take one step back in the room. So if you take one step back from the middle of the room, then that means you don't really care about it. It's not something that you want to focus on now. There's other things that you can be focusing on. If you stay in the middle, that means you neither care, you care, but you don't care at the same time, which is okay. So the reason why we do this activity is because you can get a visual representation of where each and every one of your classmates stand on a particular issue. So if you see that out of class of 30, 20 people move forward to the really care section about a particular issue, that might be something that you want to focus on as a group. Okay. So the next section is researching your issue. So we want to think about some information about the issue that we've identified. So we want to think about what are the symptoms and what are the root causes. So some of you might be like, what is a root cause? I don't know what that means. This diagram will hopefully help you out with that. So on page 4 and 5, there's a little worksheet where you can research your issue. So I want to start off with talking about the difference between a symptom and a root cause. So first of all, a symptom is something that happens because of your problem, but it's not really the reason why that problem exists. The root causes are the underlying causes of something. So if these root causes were to change or to get eliminated, then your problem would be addressed. So the best way to address a problem and to make a change is to target the root causes and not the symptoms. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because one of the things that we judge on when you're doing your project is we look for your understanding of the issue and also your understanding of the root causes. So, for example, let's say that my problem that I want to focus on is water pollution, right? So a symptom of water pollution is I see that my local pond is full of litter, right? If I fix that problem, the symptom, right, of the local pond being full of litter, I can just host a cleanup day at the pond. But is that really getting rid of the issue? No. The reason why is because even if I clean it up, the pond will still get dirty, right? So if I look at the root causes, so why is the pond getting dirty? Well, maybe it's because students at the school that's next door is throwing stuff in the pond instead of using trash cans, right? So how do I fix that? Maybe what I'll do is I'll make sure that there's more trash cans in school, outside, but also start a litterless lunch campaign so that people will start bringing less trash packaging with their lunch. Then if I address that, then I will address the problem. So eventually the local pond will no longer be full of litter because there's no litter to throw in the pond because it's either getting diverted into the trash bins or it's not being packed with you when you go to school. After that, you want to set your goals. After you talk about your root causes and what your issue is, you want to set your goals and you want to talk about what a sustainable society looks like, who are your stakeholders, your audience, and what questions do you need answered. So when you want to set your goals on page 6, there's a little worksheet there. You want to think about what your ideal world will look like and what your issue will look like in the ideal world. So that's our vision. So what do we need to do to get there and what steps lie between here and there? So just a tip that a defined project goal is beyond informative, which means that it's beyond just talking about your issue and sharing your issue. It actually gives you the opportunity to create measurable action and also demonstrates a change in behavior as well. So for example, now my local pond is too dirty, so I need to figure out what steps I need to take in order to ensure that the local pond is clean and that students no longer litter. So some of the steps that we have to do is not only educating people about why water pollution is bad and why a creek is dirty, but also demonstrating a change of behavior. So by doing a litterless lunch campaign, we're making sure that people use less packaging for their lunch. So that should minimize the amount of waste, but also by creating, having more waste bins, that would also give them the opportunity to, instead of throwing in the pond, they'll throw it in the waste bins at school. So the next section is we want to think about who the stakeholders are. That's on page 7, and also think about our target audience. So one of the things that we look at when we're judging best projects is looking at how you identify stakeholders and their relationship to the topic or the issue that you chose, but also having you list and showcase the community members and stakeholders that are involved in the project. So you might want to think, who's affected by our issue? So what kind of animals are affected? What kind of plants are affected? What kind of people are affected? Is there a particular place that's being affected negatively? What type of groups out there that are being affected? You might also want to ask yourself, who is the target audience and who needs to receive the message about your project? Do you need to communicate this with people who live around your school? Do you need to communicate this to the kindergarteners or the grade 3s in your classes, in your school? Do you need to connect to teachers, city councilors? It's all up to you depending on what your topic is. So when we talk about our questions, we need to figure out what questions that we need answered. So we have some sources that we can use to figure out how we can address the answers. So the first thing is to do research. You can use Google, you can use the internet, you can use books, you can find an expert. So you can ask a local nonprofit, you can ask the government, you can ask your cities, you can ask conservation authorities. So some of you might have like Lake Simcoe Region, Conservation Authority, Toronto Region. I think there's one in Cornwall too. I'm not sure exactly who the Conservation Authority is, but you can definitely ask them because they are definitely vaults of really good information. You can also do surveys. So you can survey people in your community, in your school. You can collect data. So you can do water testing. You can weigh waste. You can study indicators of healthy rivers and streams at your local creek if you want. And then there's also others that you can consider as well. So the reason why we talk about this is because we want to make sure that you are getting accurate and appropriate data and resources to support your understanding of local water issues, and also showing that you are implementing that within your action plan as well. So we want to make sure that the science behind what you're looking at is also true. So this is just some helpful links that you might want to write down in terms of doing surveys. You can use Survey Gizmo, you can use Google Form, you can use SurveyMonkey or Slido, which is actually really fun. Slido is actually a live Q&A tool that you can use where you can do live polls and insights, and all you need to do is just log on using your phone and you can just answer the questions there and you'll see it populate on the screen. The next section is to plan your action. So here you want to think about what different types of action you want to use, and also think about why exactly you chose that action. So you'll notice on page 10 and 12, we have some worksheets and also a list of the different types of actions that are available to tackle our issue and problem. So one thing that I'm giving you as a tip is that the best projects usually use more than one type of action. So we judge on that too. So there's a variety of different actions that we've listed here. There's something called getting your hands dirty, which is where you can plant a food or pollinator garden, you can stabilize a riverbank, you can pull out invasive species in your local creek. There's citizen science projects where you contribute to science and conservation, so you can track the health of bird populations and amphibians in your local creek. You can do a frog watch, an ice watch. There's also making consumer choices where you make your own homemade, Canadian-made, locally grown products like lip balm, organizing a clothing swap. That could be something that you do. Making lifestyle choices, so reducing the use of single-use plastics by making reusable bags and food wrap out of beeswax. That can be something that you can do. Making sure that everybody uses stainless steel straws, using reusable water bottles instead of bottled water. A lot of people do a lot of education and information projects where you raise awareness and you educate community members, younger students. You can do that from a variety of ways, not only through posters. You can do that through doing a workshop. You can do that by creating a song, creating a game, doing a play. It's really how much creativity that you have and also time that you have as well. The next one is to engage in political action. So meeting with the mayor to persuade him or her to make a change in your community, becoming a blue city, a blue community. You can raise funds. So a lot of the times we had projects in the past where they fundraise and they donated the money that they raised towards an external charity or cause to implement your own project. So that's something that you can look at as well. So this is just some examples of some outdoor actions that have taken place. So we really do encourage you to get outside in your community, and when you're filming, taking shots of you outside in the community as well. So you can go to your local river, bank, do some water quality testing if you wanted to, pull some weeds, do some sampling. You can do a shoreline cleanup if you want as well. These are just some that we've seen in the past. If you want to look for more ideas, these are some two great places that you can find information. You can go to the Our Canada Project website, which is a project site by Youth for Youth, where youth across Canada post their projects that they are undertaking within their own communities. So you can do a search for water-related projects up there. Look at what they did in terms of their action, but also their vision, and see if that relates to you. And hopefully, eventually, you'll also post there as well. Another great tool that I encourage you to look at is to look at past films on YouTube. So we just have the links on the slideshow here, which you can click. So we have a playlist of best project from previous years, best films from previous years, but also honorable mentions as well. So one thing that I want to say is that when you're looking at past films, you might be, encouraged to follow what they've done, but we really want you to look at things in a creative lens. So we want you to really be unique and be creative and see how you can make your project a lot different from theirs. But they're a really good starting point to look at. Before we contact people, we want to define success. So figure out what we need to measure and what are our timelines. So there are usually a few ways that we can define success. But we need to know that if you have expectations, you can compare your real data to help you do better next time. So a good thing that you can do is to set timelines for the goals. So do you want to finish your goals by the end of the semester, by the end of the month, by the end of the week? So let's say if you start today, you might want to say, okay, by the end of this week, I want to do some research on who I can connect to, and then you'll have that done. So that could be an indicator of success for you if you choose. So one thing that I would suggest is that when you want to figure out your timelines, you want to map out dates and times, and you also want to plan for delays, because in most times there will be unexpected delays that you don't realize. So one thing that I wanted to share was that our films are due on March 6th. So make sure whatever timelines you decide with regards to your project, with regards to filming, that they ensure that your films will be completed and uploaded by March 6th. So we'll send some information about how you can upload your films at a later date. So before we measure anything, we need to figure out what we want to measure. So this is just an example of things that indicate that we've made progress towards our goal with respect to the project. So for example, one of the evidence that we made progress towards our goal is that if our goal is to reduce plastic water bottles by 50%, we need to provide one piece of evidence that we've been successful. So a tool that we can use to measure our success is to count the number of plastic water bottles in the garbage before and after the campaign. So you might want to do this through a 10-week period, let's say, see if the number decreases at the end of each week. Maybe indicate that, one specific measurement that we would be happy with is, if we reduce the number from start to finish by 50%, that could be something that we would indicate that we would be happy with. So we want to ask ourselves, what are our goals? What are we trying to do? How will we know that we've done it? So we want to think about the steps that we need to take whenever we want to achieve a sustainable society, like I mentioned earlier. So some of the examples and tools that you can use to measure results is to do waste audits. You can do a survey where you can track, the change in behavior before and after your project or your campaign. You can do a reusable water bottle tracking sheet. So for example, you can monitor how many students bring a reusable water bottle to school. That's just some examples of what we've seen before in the past. So the next one is creating your work plan. So figure out what tasks you need to do and who is doing what. So the chart on page 15 will help you plan out details like who's going to be doing the research, who's going to be approaching supporters, who's writing what, and so forth. So one of the things that we talk about in both student guides is collaboration. So an action project requires meaningful engagement of all students throughout the entire process. So as I mentioned before, you can either work as a whole classroom, or you can separate into small groups if you want. It's really up to you and your teacher to decide. If you plan to do it in small groups, we recommend a minimum of 7 people per group, but 8 to 10 would probably be better. So that's something for you to decide with your teacher. So there are multiple roles that you can take on during the project, and every single role is important. So when you're picking these roles and dividing the roles, you want to think about what your strengths and weaknesses and interests are in deciding what roles suit you best. So for example, you might have someone who's really great at talking to people, doing the interviewing, or you may have someone who's really great at drawing or tech stuff. So if you're really good at drawing, you might want to be the one that's creating posters. If you're good at tech stuff, you might be the one that wants to make the website. So those are just some examples of roles that you can undertake. One thing that we always stress is that collaboration and communication will help make your project and your filmmaking process go super smooth, and it really shows at the end when we judge the films. We do have some examples of some roles that you can play as in the filming process as well. Maham will talk about that later on next week. Sorry, not next week, at the end of this week. If you are able to join us, we would love to have you. So after you're going to be doing the action project, and then we're going to make sure that we suggest that you film at the same time. So filming yourself going outdoors, filming yourself brainstorming as you do it. We want to see the process from start to finish. So in terms of communicating your message, you want to think about how you want to communicate your message, what type of media you want to use, how do you engage your supporters, and think about people who might be able to help you, and also address people who might be resistant to your project. So think about your network. So we all have a network that we belong with. It's you, your parents, your teachers, your friends, coaches, social media, like people on Twitter, people on your Instagram. So how are each of these people or groups involved? They can either be people who participate, they can be sponsors, they can be your targeted audience, they can be your expert. So you want to figure out the perfect avenues to share, promote your project, but also to connect with these individuals. So there's a lot of tools that you can use. So what we look at in terms of judging best project is we look for extensive use of all types of media to broadcast your message to the community. So you might want to use some of the following that's listed. So you might want to use social media, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. You might want to use broadcast media. You might want to use print media. You might want to have some assemblies. You might want to create some games. You might want to create a song, a play. It's up to you and how creative you want to get. And these are just some real examples of some sites, Twitter pages, and a picture from an assembly that one of the past classes made in the program. And then one thing that we suggest is that if you're going to be creating your own Twitter, or if you're going to be tweeting, tweet at our Twitter page at WD at School, and also use the hashtag, and we'll make sure that we retweet you so that it will get your message across to the rest of the community that's participating this year. So here are some student guides. So we have some student guides that LSF has created. So the first one is the Action Project Media Guide. So if you want to connect with people who are in the media, so people who write newspapers, you can also connect with people in your school board to share the message. We have a guide that you can access. And we also have some tips on choosing the right platform for social media and how you can maximize your reach too. So you can just read that at a later date. It's also on the Google Drive as well. These are some examples of some website builders and some poster makers that you might be interested in looking. So we judge for creative methods that are used in the implementation and communication of your action project. So if you want to use some of these website builders, there's Google Sites, there's Weebly, Wix, and WordPress. Those are really easy to use. They're also free too. They have a free version that you can use. And there's also a couple of poster makers that you can use. So like Be Funky, Canva, PictoChart, and Snappa. So you can create flyers, brochures, some pictures that you can share on Facebook and Twitter. Those are free for you to use as well. So these are some of our tips and tricks for sharing your project and connecting to people. So first of all, you want to start early. You want to plan in advance. So think of ways to promote your initiative in the beginning. You want to choose the right platform. So for example, if you're going to target people that are younger students, like for example, kindergartners, they might not have Twitter accounts. So you might not want to tweet about your project to them. So you might want to use posters that you can stick around school, let's say, right? You might want to think about how you want to share valuable and relevant content. So one thing that we always suggest is that using pictures and videos are worth more than 1,000 words. You also want to spark conversation. So you always want to be active in the conversations that you're talking about with regards to your issue. You want to make yourself known to media personnel, and you also want to ensure that you have a contact database or list that you can reach out to at any time. So basically people who you think are key players in helping you address the issue, have their emails or their phones that you can reach out, research about that. And then we also want you to be active. And then there's others that you can think about too, but those are some of the tips that we would like to share. So one thing that I want to share is like when you're trying to connect with your city councilors or your mayor, one thing that you might want to do first is, you know, once you figure out your issue, think about what kind of questions you want to ask them, but do some research in with respect to, you know, what are their emails, how can I give them a phone call, and then what you want to do is once you figure out how to contact them, you want to introduce yourself. Hey, I'm a student at this school and my issue is about this, and I would really love to meet with you and chat with you to figure out, you know, how we can work together to solve this particular issue, or if I can ask you some questions about this issue, that would be great. So one thing that I've noted is that city councilors and mayors, they love hearing from youth. So if you just reach out to them, I think that would, and don't be like shy about it, that would be fine. And then if you don't hear back from them, just follow up with them. So send them a reminder email like a week after, or give them a call after and remind them about the project. So those would be some tips that you can use. We also have a video that I can share with you of a school group that connected to the mayor at Mississauga. So I'll share that in an email as well after this session. So the next step is to reflect and celebrate. So you want to share your project and think about what would have been done differently. How would you keep it going, or what would you do to improve it or to start a new one? And another thing that I want to share is our final reporting template as well. So our final reporting template is on page 17 and 20. So after you finish your project on March 6th, after you finish your project on March 6th, we just ask that you complete a short reporting template for us so that we can share that along with your film. So it helps us see the difference that you've made within your community, and also helps you pass along any insights that you might have with regards to the program. So how can we make this program better for students next year? So we're looking forward to reviewing them. You just need to provide a small description, some numbers on the impact that you've done within your own community, and also some points and comments about improvement too. The next thing is that I wanted to share was funding and awards. So some of you might be worried about starting a project because you might not have, you know, money to buy materials for your project. That's okay. We're here to help you as an organization. So we have a program called our EcoLeague Action Project Funding program, where we offer schools up to $400 of money that they can use to fund materials that they need for their project. So the only thing is that these applications are due on Friday of next week. So just let us know what your action is, what your vision is, and some materials that you may need to buy. And if approved, we can give your school up to $400. So in the past, we had a school that didn't have money to buy like some materials for the filming process, so they just needed a mic. So we provided them with $400 so that they can use that money to buy mics or like a tripod, because they didn't want to create them themselves because they had 3 classes that they wanted to participate. So we funded them for that. We also have some opportunities for you to win some money after you complete your project as well, because you have your video that's completed. You can apply for the Jack Layton Award. Our Jack Layton Award for Youth Action and Sustainability, you can win up to $500 if you win first place. But if you post on the Our Canada Project website, which is the site I shared before, and you have a completed project by spring of next year, you can win up to $3,000 to help support your school for other projects in the future. And that's pretty much it from me. That was a lot of information. So if you have any questions beyond today's session, you can definitely send myself or Bob an email. I'm happy to take some questions now. So let me just unmute everyone. So if there's anything that I didn't address, I'm happy to answer them.
One of the questions that we had, because we have some students that are doing their own specific initiative.
Okay.
Ask for funding. You're looking for specifics of that actual initiative. We're not asking for the money. We're asking for the money for a specific thing.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
So if you are asking for funding, the $400 funding, it would be for a specific item, say for instance, like a piece of equipment or plants to plant for a water project of some kind, but you're not asking for just the 400, you're asking for a specific thing.
Yeah, so so if you can list out items that you might use the 400 for, we can approve. So the thing is, we have to approve the application first before we give you the money. So if you just indicate what you need the money for, we can fund that. So in the past, like, yes, we've had people, students ask for some seeds because they wanted to plant some pollinators. So that's something that we would fund. One thing that we don't fund though is, like, let's say if your school is looking to implement a water refill station, that's something that we do not fund, because we want them to be, we want whatever the items are being used for, it's being used by the students for a hands-on activity.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oops. Oops.
Thanks a lot, everybody, and best of luck with your project.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Oh, also,